I pulled the plug on a 12-mile training run with blown out knees, and I genuinely thought that my marathon was over. But here's the system that I used to get to the finish line anyway. When I decided to run the marathon, like most people, whenever you're going to attack something big, you need to develop a plan, right? Like that is the honest truth. We need to develop a plan to get going so we have a direction. And that's exactly what I did once I decided to enter this marathon. Was I found an app that was quite reputable, put in the constraints, and I built a plan and went to work on it. But even the best plan has a ceiling and can only take us so far. So I got my plan together and I went full steam ahead with my running plan and my goal to run the Ogden Marathon. And things are going great until I start hitting about the 10-mile markers. And these 10-mile runs were proving to be quite difficult for me. I would hit just this wall that I really hadn't experienced before, in spite of, my years of physical activity. And I just had like absolutely no energy around mile 9. As I later, found out, a lot of this was fueling. This was another element to training that even an app with its best intentions couldn't quite coach out, was the fueling thing, which, I was able to figure out. But it started to mess with my head a little bit. And I think this was where the first doubts started to creep in this journey, as I was thinking like, okay, if I can't complete 10 miles, how can I complete 26.2? That's not even half of the distance. But we got through that. I started to play with the feeling a little bit. But this is the first spot where I had to start figuring something out, and the problem started to arise a little bit. So I got through that mile 10 slump, but the real crisis happened at about the runs where I had to hit about 12 miles. So I gained some confidence. I'd hit a couple of those 10-mile runs, and I decided one day, I'm like, hey, I don't ever get out to see my grandma very often, right? Like, I'm gonna be a good grandson. And I had about this 12-mile run, and grandma lives about 12 miles away from me. But I didn't account for how hilly the run was to my grandma. Now you might be thinking, oh dude, yeah, you didn't account for those uphills. Believe it or not, it was the downhill that I didn't account for. And this was kind of, I guess, my breaking point of the training. I went down these hills, and I had to go down a hill, up a hill, down another. Both these hills were pretty big. And I got down the second hill, and towards the bottom, once I'd hit the flats again, which would be flat all the way out to my grandma's house, around mile 9, my knees were screaming. They basically said no more. Like, I knew that, like, if I kept going on this run, I was going to seriously injure myself. Oh, ultimately, I guess I decided to live and fight another day. But it's still kind of shitty when you pull the plug. This was my breaking point. I already had the doubt a little bit with the fueling thing, like, hey, could I complete this? But then at this 12-mile run, I'm like, can my body even handle this? I just tried to do a 12-mile run, and it's just, my body's deteriorating on me. Like, what in the heck do I do with this? And, if you're ever training for something hard, this is about the worst place that you can be in at that moment in time, is to have that serious doubt in your mind. And at that point, like, because I could almost like taste the failure at that moment, and I felt so defeated. But I wasn't going to let myself give up either at this moment in time. So now I've hit rock bottom, like hence the mile 12, as I mentioned. Like this was where I was ready to pull the plug. But I didn't want to give up so badly. I did not want to give up on this goal. So I started to regroup. First thing I did was I decided, okay, I'm not going to try to run for a week at all. I'm just going to rest, listen to my body. So I did that. Well, within that week time frame, I'd also started to, look on social media for local running groups, things like that. Just, because we talk in like all kinds of personal development, like you surround yourself, you expose yourself to those things that are positive around you. And this was one of those times that it paid off. So we had a running group for this marathon specifically, and they posted that there was going to be a clinic on how to deal with pain and prevent it and treat it as a runner as you're training to run a marathon. Talk about perfect timing. And this fell actually within that week. It was just insane how that worked out. So I went and attended this clinic. And so I started to get some great advice. Like, I don't want to dive in too much of the detail, but I learned like how much more important it was to dial my nutrition even further. I'd kind of already learned that with the 10-mile while I was hitting, and I was just getting through. So I knew to up that. There were some other tips and some things like that. And everything started to snowball from here as far as what was good and what was the fix. I go to this clinic. As I'm mentioning, I'm finding some things like I need to dial in my nutrition a little bit more. There's a few other things that I could work on. Well, as I'm at this clinic, this running store, they had several coaches that are affiliated with them at this clinic, and I hit it off with one of these local coaches, and he and I started having a conversation. And as I looked at the plan that was laid out for me when I was using this app, which was great, it got me going. We found that it was training me to run a faster pace than realistically I should have been running on a first marathon. So at that point we knew, okay, some of these workouts right now were where I was at, though they would be good, and if applied in a perfect world, if I had had the base with some of my structure and that, they would be great. But where I was at was that my goal on the first marathon was to make time cutoffs and to cross the finish line whole. So this is where the readjustment came in, and it really started to change for me. And I realized that I didn't need to pull the plug. So we made some changes. We removed some of the speed workouts from my plan and focused on, okay, let's focus on the things to build up your structure, go back to the speed, but make it less of a priority than it had already been. So I started running with this, no pun intended, with this new structure. And there was more that came about with also the restructuring of the plan that helped me get there. And after I made the adjustment to this plan, I also decided that I needed to stop going at this thing completely alone. And the club, they had group runs. And so I started going to at least like the midweek group runs. And this was such a game changer for me. And I think this is also where, I got to see firsthand where everything you do, they say, surround yourself with like-minded people. And this was such a game changer for me in so many different ways by getting social with the group runs. For one, like it just wasn't so lonely. You had somebody to talk to. Well, then, going back to the diet and nutrition, I had someone that I became friends with along this. They know who they are. And we both are on similar medications, and you know, they brought up like, hey, you know, my doctor is actually pulling me back on this. So then that sparked me to go and talk to my doctor. And so I went and had some extra consultations with my doctor, and I found out I needed to make that same adjustment. I learned other tips and tricks, and the runs felt shorter as well. In fact, all the way up through like my last big long run before the marathon, I got to do this run not by myself. I had company. It started to make it more enjoyable, and as I started building this, the pain went away, the confidence went up. I wasn't encountering a lot of those obstacles that I was encountering in this whole process as I started to adjust my plan after I realized, you know, this perfect laid out plan wasn't working. But roll with it, stick with it, and realize that no plan is perfect. This really started to make a major shift in the success of my marathon training. So race day came. Got on the bus, went up to the starting line, and there we went. And literally we're off to the races. And, you know, in the time, the finish line came. And I crossed that line pretty dang close, within a few minutes of what the recalibrated goal was. I crossed with no knee pain, which was a big one for me, as you know, that was what almost made me pull the plug. I also was passing people in the last 3 miles. I know that that's not a big deal, but it also told me that what I did worked. And I also crossed happy. And this is a great story, but what's the point of it? And the point was, I started with a plan, and the plan was great. It got me going. But what helped me, no pun intended, cross the finish line was that I was willing and flexible enough to break the plan and rebuild it. When I saw pieces that weren't working, I was flexible and I was willing to stay consistent. I knew that that structure needed to be there, even if it wasn't perfect as I'd envisioned it. And that's my ending challenge to you guys is, you know, go develop that plan, find that big goal, you know, do all those things the other goal setting videos, one that I'll probably make as well, will tell you to do. But life happens. Plans never go according to plan. And if you're willing to be flexible with them in the best way and regroup when things don't go perfect, when you get hurt, when you get sick, when you hit the wall, go find your resources, be flexible, find your people, and it's going to blow your mind what you can accomplish, however big or small it is. And if you've watched to this point in the video, I do appreciate you hanging out and hearing me tell a goofy story, and hopefully you find value in it. And if you did, I recommend that you check out this video right here. The good old YouTube algorithms have determined that's the best video for you to continue this journey you're on. And with that, y'all, better every day.